Hello, welcome everybody. We are on the PTS, just so I have access to the good gear, but I'm going to be bringing you my Magsorc build for Wraithstone. Um, in this video, I'm going to be going over gear, racial traits, um, uh, decision making in what gear you should be wearing, and skill breakdown, why I do this, have the skills that I do, and my thought process in going about just the entire build. I'll be covering CP too, but CP is subjective to what your personal preference is. So let's get into the race and the traits and all the attributes and stuff like that. Right now, I'm running a Breton. I believe that the Breton is the better choice for most people in this patch on a Magsorc than the High Elf. Can you sustain on a high elf? Yes, it's possible. You might need to still use spell symmetry or dark conversions to sustain it though. So I just prefer the Breton. It falls back in damage just a touch, but since I'm not in a score pushing group and I'm not min maxing to the 100% that's possible, I choose Breton over anything else. Alright, we have all of our points into Magicka. We are running the Shadow Mundus Stone because the Shadow Mundus Stone got buffed a lot in this patch. We're going to be a vampire. You don't have to be a stage 4. In fact, anything with fire damage, I recommend dropping it to stage 2. And for our food, in solo situations for parsing, in your house, for example, I recommend ice cream. Otherwise, run gold food. If you don't have gold food, run purple food. Uh, we need the Magicka recovery in order to get the job done because our sustain is still terrible. I mean, it's it's, it's really pretty bad. All right, let's get into our gear. So our gear, we're going to be running Zons in fights we can stay stacked on the boss, which is a lot of them. Most fights in the game you can proc Zons pretty well and reliably. There's some fights that you can't do that, so then it's a decision for you to make whether you want the extra health from Valken Scoria or the extra Magicka from Alambris. Both are perfectly acceptable to use. It just depends on whether you want the more survivability or you want the little bit extra damage from Alambris. Alright, and then we go to our body pieces. For stationary fights that you can build high stacks um, on Sororia, use Sororia. There are a lot of fights in the game that if you're disciplined, that with your stacking and your movement, you can build your Sororia stacks quite high and keep them high throughout the duration of the fight. It does take practice to use it effectively, and it is basically a mini game of how high I can build my stacks in a fight to get the most damage out of it. But there is quite a few fights in the game that you can use this very effectively. Now, if you cannot build stacks effectively, there are several different gear options you can use here, and all perform relatively the same in place of this. As a Magsorc, we will be those gear options for this particular build are Necropotence, Burning Spell Weave, and Spell Strategist. Uh, each have their own strengths. Each has their own weaknesses, and I'll go over them. First with Necropotence. Necropotence gives us way more sustainability than the other sets because it gives us way more max magicka. It increases our pet damage by quite a bit, and it's a great set to use for high mobility single target fights. that have no extra cleave needed in them. And we will be able to uh, you will be able to sustain a lot easier with that set. The downside is it's all single target damage. You have less cleave with it than you would with a burning spell weave, but it is just slightly ahead of burning spell weave in single target because of the pet uh, damage increase it gives you because of the max magicka. The second set I would recommend is burning spell weave. uh, Burning spell weave is a very good set to have on your body, uh, and it's in the same range as Necropotent single target. It falls just a tiny bit behind Necropotence and single target, but it offers way more cleave because of the extra spell damage we get on the proc. So that's why we would use Burning Spell Weave on our body instead of Necropotence. It offers us way more cleave damage with our Liquid Lightning, Blockade, and every and stuff like that. And then the other set we can run is Sororia, or not Sororia, Spell Strategist on our body. Now I don't have any Spell Strategist body, but you can get the stats for a minute from this. No, they updated the tooltip for Spell Strategist so that you can only apply it every 5 seconds. And the mark lasts 5 seconds, so there is a little bit more downtime than there was. I think it was bugged to do it every 4 seconds. I guess I didn't see anything in the patch notes to say they changed it, but it did get changed, I guess. So, Spell Strategist is more single target DPS than Burning Spell Weave, and more single target than Necropotence, but it's purely single target. It's not going to amplify your damage on AoE fights as much as Burning Spell Weave would. So Spell Strategist is great, yes, but it's purely single target. And unless you're doing a purely single target fight, I wouldn't put it as top tier. I would still use Burning Spell Weave over Spell Strategist unless it's purely single target. Like VAS +0, I would definitely use Spell Strategist on the final boss on the body over, say, Sororia. Can you use Sororia in that fight? Yes, you can. You'll lose stacks, but it will. You should be able to use it to great effect still. I would personally use Spell Strategist over it though, because in that fight, it's only single target. Even now, if you do +2 or +1/+2, I would switch it out for Burning Spell Weave just for the extra cleave on the ads that you need, the mini bosses. But that's basically my decision making on the body items. There's a few different sets you can use, and you'll have to make your decision on what fight you're doing and you're using for what gear set. And then for our weapons and jewelry, right now I am rocking Mechanical Acuity. Mechanical Acuity is parsing really high, and from what I hear from people, it's doing very well in trials too, because of the shadow buff. Now, if you don't like Mechanical Acuity, or you don't have Mechanical Acuity, and you have Mother Sorrow instead, you can throw Mother Sorrow on here. It's slightly less damage overall, but it will do you just fine, and it'll still get you really good numbers. Uh, for in case in point, our off two sets for that don't offer the 100% best of the best spell damage like Sororia does. If you run Burning Spellweave and Mother Sorrow, you should still be able to pull over 50k on a 6 million target dummy on good parses. On great parses, you can get up to 52, almost 53. On bad parses, you'll be down at 49. That's just my numbers. For your numbers, it'll be that's about the same range, but it'll be adjusted to whatever your capability is. But both sets are doing really really good. Um, so I personally use Bloodthirsty on my trait for my jewelry. I think it just amplifies too much of our damage under 25% for for us not to use it. There are arguments that using arcane or infuse traits on your jewelry will be better because the night blades finish the execute so fast, but that's really subjective to the fight as well, because some fights the execute lasts longer and give us more opportunity to get the bloodthirsty damage in. But regardless of the fight, you're still getting that amplitude bonus to your skills, or the the trait or the trait bonus to our skills. So we get extra damage in the execute under 25%, no matter what, because it's always going to be there. It's just going to be dependent on how fast the execute phase goes and how many night blades you're running, to how much of a bonus you're going to get. So that's why I run bloodthirsty. In some stuff I might run arcane just for a little extra sustain, and but it's really hard for me to go away from bloodthirsty just by the numbers I've gotten with it in the past, and right now with the passive change for this passive, it was implosion, now it's amplitude. Increases our damage done. It's a reverse execute now, so you get extra damage done to the target. Increases your damage done against enemies by 1% for every 10% of current health they have. So at 100%, we'll be doing 10% more damage. At 1%, or at 10%, we'll be doing 1% extra damage. And that's why I like Bloodthirsty. It just evens out the damage throughout the entire length of the fight versus just front loading every single piece of damage we have and then hoping the fight is over fast enough for it not to matter. And it's really up to you. It's like, again, I said, a lot of the stuff is subjective. This is my personal preference. And then for our back bar, we are running a Maelstrom Inferno staff. If you don't have a Maelstrom Inferno staff, get a Maelstrom Inferno staff. Yeah, get a Maelstrom Inferno staff. It increases our damage by just a ridiculous amounts because of our light and heavy attack damage bonus when they're in blockade. Get a Maelstrom Inferno staff. For our traits on our staves, both infused. Since we're using mechanical acuity. If you're not using mechanical acuity and you decide to use spell strategist here, you can use precise on your front bar and all that, but don't use spell strategist on your front bar. It's still up there in damage. It's just behind acuity in terms of damage, and so you can use it, but Acuity will give us more cleave. Acuity will It's just a better set in my opinion. It's the same reason why I run a Burning Spell Weave on my front bar a lot of times. It's just because the extra cleave for the ads and offers more utility. But we're going to be running Shock, Damage, Enchant on our back bar. Now this is the reason I have it set up this way is because I like double damage enchants, and I have fire damage on my front bar, so I can have prismatic proccing on my back bar when there's a prismatic fight. So that's so I can still have the burning going on my front bar at the same time as prismatic going on my back bar. All right, and that's basically it for the gear. There's a lot of decision making to going into what gear setups you're running. So you have to think about it ahead of time and get all your gears laid out for the trial or dungeon you're doing, and whatnot. So we're gonna go into the CP. CP is playstyle dependent a lot of times too. Um, for me, this is my general CP setup for Blue Tree that I use. 56 Elfborn, 64 Elemental Expert, 20 Spell Erosion, 61 Master at Arms, 25 in Staff Expert, and 44 in the Thaumaturge. Now, this is completely up to you. If you parse higher with other setups, go for it. But it's really dependent on your particular weave rate, your particular dot uptime, and everything like that. So you gotta parse. You gotta know yourself. You gotta know how you're doing. For this, the red tree, it's whatever content you're doing. I think I'm set up for Cloud Rest on this one, but normally I have 81 in Ironclad, 0 in Dispel Shield, 56 in each one of these, and dump the remainder in Quick Recovery. Sorry about that. And then for Green Tree, 43 in Warlord, 76 Arcanist, 76 Tenacity, and 75 in Tumbling. And that's basically because I like tumbling more than blocking, and I like to have a lot the most mana I can get back if I have to heavy attack. If I don't ever have to heavy attack, this is wasted space, and I can put more into sprinters, or bashing focus, or and warlord, and then I can put some into shadow ward too. So if you plan on never heavy attacking, by all means go for it. But I like having the backup just in case. So that's the CP. Let's go into the skills. Now we are running a one pet build here. So we're running Daedric Prey, because it amplifies our pet more than uh, in anything else. And we're using Elo Weapon. If you don't want to use Elo Weapon because you hate Elemental Weapon, you can use Force Pulse here. It's not a terrible thing to do, and in some cases it's better to do, like to kill small ads. And you got a little bit of AoE going with Force Pulse too, or if you need to interrupt, throw on Crushing Shock. Um, but I like Elemental Weapon because I got used to it. I still hate weaving with it, but I got used to it. Crystal Fragments, obviously, because Crystal Frags hits like a truck. Mage's Wrath and or Endless Fury, depending on what you're doing. Endless Fury will give you mana back if you kill it with it. And Mage's Wrath, just a little bit more explosion damage. So it's a wash between what you want to do. And then we're using the Matriarch right now because the Twilight Tormentor is bugged currently as of now. So the active ability just won't do anything. I read a post that Zoss was working on fixing it. So we'll see what we get when that happens. Now, when the Twilight Tormentor is fixed, it's gonna add about roughly 1 to 2k damage on a solo parse. Uh, on a solo 6 million parse. Now that'll go up a lot in a trial because of all the buffs that are going around. So it'll be a significant increase in a trial. Uh, but then again, the matriarch has a heal, and sometimes the heal is more important than the extra damage. So it's really dependent on what you're doing. Uh, I like the matriarch. It does still really good damage, but it gives me an element of survivability, and survivability for everybody around me that's actually getting healed by it, if I am. And then we're going to be using a couple of different ultimates here. We can use Shooting Star for extra magicka and regen, or we can use we can use we can use Destro ult. Destro ult is really good still. Uh, it's really good AoE. Um, Sets them on fire, all that jazz. So we can use that. And if we really want to, if you really feel like getting it all into the electric Sith Overlord mode, you can use Overload on your front bar. Now this gives us a couple of things. It gives you really high AoE, um, and can set everything off balance, or get everything in the trash map concussion, so they get extra damage done to them. But it also increases your spell damage by 2% for when you have it slotted over, let's say, Destro ult, or say Shooting Star. It gives you the extra slot bonus for having another sorcerer ability slotted. So it's really good for that too. I actually like Overload. A lot of people bitch about Overload, but I actually like it. I don't like weaving with it because it's slow and clunky, but the AoE damage of the heavy attack is just massive. If you can keep your dots going while you have that, it does quite a bit of damage. Um, and it's just fun to be a Sith. You know, a Sith Lord. You know, it's just shooting lightning out of your hands. I like it. I do like it. And then back bar, we have Liquid Lightning, Blockade, Elemental Drain. Elemental Drain is only for parses because we need to have the regen, we need to have the extra pen and all that stuff to get to finish through it and get good numbers from it. So if you're not just by yourself and just solo parsing a dummy, take this off. Uh, put on. There's a couple things you can put on here. As a Breton, you can put on Boundless Storm. It gives us our major resistance buffs, gives us major expedition for a little bit, and it does some damage too. It's a really good skill to have on there. It doesn't cost a lot of magicka, and it's around for 23 seconds. It's a really good skill. If you're not comfortable running wardless, um, you throw your shield on here. But I would recommend everybody play at least a little bit of wardless time with this build to see if they like it, if they're capable of doing it. If you're not capable of doing it, throw the ward on there. But I think you'll find that this build has a lot of survivability with the matriarch, uh, even in high-end trials without a ward. And then rearming trap or channel acceleration, depending if you have to stay at ranged or if you can get into melee to throw down a trap. A trap will do more damage, uh, just because inherently it does damage. So trap or channel accelerate, and then we have our matriarch again because we have to double bar it. One day maybe they'll let us just summon the pet instant cast and have it do damage for like 30 seconds and then go away. That will be the good times. And then we have Greater Storm Atro uh, for our single target, a buff ability. Uh, it's just phenomenal ultimate to use. It does a lot of damage. It gives major berserk to the Atronach and the ally that activates the Atronach. So 25% for 8 seconds. Huge buff. Especially if they're in the execute phase and a Nightblade's hitting, impales and Killer's Blades for 100k already. Get that buff. It's over. Uh, but yeah, that's just about it for the skills. Um, Now, if you're comfortable running wardless and you don't want to use Boundless Storm because you're a high elf and you need extra regen, you can put Dark Convergence or Spell Symmetry there too, if you're comfortable with your healers. So you have extra sustain that'll even the damage out in the long run, and that's perfectly fine to do. Uh, it's personal preference. All right, let's do a parse here. See if we can't get some decent numbers going on. Uh, 52 is on the low end for this build. The high end for me, again, these are my numbers. 52 is on the low end. Uh, 58 is the uppermost end for me personally. I have seen people hit 60 with this build, um, with just external elemental drain with parse food. So let's get into this parse. See if I can't do the build justice or make it, completely a flop in your eyes and in the eyes of everybody else, including mine. And we are still a Sorc, so our sustain really sucks. So if you're having trouble sustaining on a parse, you'll have to find out where you need personally to start when your potion buff is running down. Me personally, I start after 20 seconds. Now, I have been running a dynamic rotation lately for this, and I find it does more damage because dynamic rotations pretty much always do more damage. But if you don't want to use a dynamic rotation, you can use a static rotation. It'll still do you good damage, just won't be a top tier. And there we go. We got about 54, which is perfectly acceptable. Um, it's not great. It's not bad. It's right there in the middle. It's about average. Let's see, our minor vulnerability time is really high with this build because of the shock damage on it. Um, so we get a little inflation with that. But it's people say it's inflated, yada yada yada. But in realistically, it's the same damage buff as you would get from getting combat prayer. So for let's say a stand blade that can't put any minor vulnerability uptime, but they can put up uh, minor berserk from their abilities. They're both 8%. So I got less buff up time than they would. Uh, and in a trial, I would get combat prayer. So it's a wash on that. So I don't get the whole minor vulnerability cheese that people say, because it's not always up. It's not. I mean, people aren't perfect. I guess if you're in an optimized group, you can say something different. But all right, light attacks a little bit low, but that's also because we had 4 overload attacks in there, so that's a little bit higher. 99 instead of 100 that we should have for this kind of parse. Liquid lightning. Our light attacks were also a little bit low on the crit rate, um, so we had room for improvement there. Let's see. Liquid lightning was good. We had a little bit of downtime on liquid lightning, but that's I always do. There's room for improvement there. I'm still learning the dynamic rotation priority list, and I'm still perfecting it. Blockade was up the whole time. We had good crit rates on those. Elemental weapon we had just a little bit low on the crit rate, about 4%, 5% low on that. We still did fairly decent damage with it. We only had 12 crystal fragment procs, and so that's a huge um, DPS decrease on that. But again, that's RNG. I don't expect to get 20 frag procs in every single fight. Um, I would say 15, uh, 12 to 17 is about average. So it's on the low side of average, but it's still in that general window of acceptability. If it's like 9 or 10, that's really low and you got screwed with RNG. Um, but the crit rate was decent. Uh, our Shock Enchant did some work there with 3000 DPS, 58% crit rate. Could be higher, um, since our spell critical is average at 61 throughout the parse because of mechanical acuity. So there's a lot of fluctuations in these parses with mechanical acuity, um, more so than you would have otherwise. So it's the highest highs, but the lows aren't really all that much lower than you would get with other sets. So the potential's there for ridiculous DPS. Uh, it's just not, what's the word for it? Mental blank. Uh, Stable. It's just not stable for 100% of the time. But we got around average DPS, nothing special. And the reason I use overload here at the end is just for a little extra sustain. I know people are like, some people just absolutely hate overload, but it helps you get through the lean times right there at the end. I mean, I went to ran completely out of Magicka because I was able to pop a potion, but it's just a little pick me up there throughout the fight, and it doesn't cost that much, and I like it. I like shooting lightning from my hand. And let's see. My buffs were up all the time with my potions. Minor force was only at 90%, so again, that would be a lot higher. We actually did get really good acuity uptime at 27%. Most of the time, it's hovers at 24. I've seen low as 21, but it's pretty good. That was a pretty good for that in particular. So all in all, this is a pretty average parse. There were some good things, there were some bad things, and it equaled out into right in that your average range. Um, yeah, so I hope this video will help you in your decision making process, uh, when choosing your gear, your skills, and your just general overall, just generally overall with your everything you need to know about a Magsorc. It's not everything you need to know, but it's a good place to start and learn the class. Um, It offers a great deal of potential. Hopefully, it doesn't get nerfed so we can have our time doing great DPS instead of everybody else getting to do great DPS without us. And hopefully, we won't be a meme class anymore. I'm really looking forward to getting when they fix the Tormentor to see how much that increases raid buff parses. And I foresee that doing 80k raid buff parses won't be out of the question for Magsorcs. At least for me. Uh, it'll be really interesting to see the next couple of weeks for the patch and see how it breaks down. I hope, like again, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you again next time. Thank you all for watching if you made it this far.